This Adidas Chinese jacket has been a trendy item on the internet for the past couple of months. But here's the peculiar part. People on TikTok started questioning why they don't really see Chinese people wearing it, and why those influencers are receiving hate from Chinese people.
I saw a content creator on here make a video about the viral Chinese New Year Adidas jackets and how he only ever sees foreigners wearing them, and he got a decent amount of hate comments from what I observed. And I was like, this comment section reeks of insecurity. And I'm gonna set the record straight. Like, I've been in China for 4 months, and I've been to Shanghai, Beijing, Hangzhou, a bunch of other niche cities, and it's 100% true. You only ever see foreigners wearing this jacket, and it's not like a bad thing. I think the design is cool.
Here's the thing. This jacket has sparked a lot of hate in China as well, and I'm going to explain the reasons behind the hate, why you don't really see Chinese people wearing it, and is it okay for you to wear it. This is one big cultural anthropology video with fashion history and Chinese history, and timestamp is also available as well. It is that deep. Now, class begins. Reason number 1. Some Chinese try to avoid a bad omen because Tangzhuang reminds them of death. But how come Tangzhuang is associated with death? Aha! Let's talk about shouyi. Elderly people often prepare clothes that they will wear after death while they're still alive. And these clothes are respectfully called shouyi. It is a term that implies wishes for health and longevity. Many elderly people want to return to the traditional way after passing away, so they like to choose traditional Chinese clothing for their last piece of clothing. For a long time, Tangzhuang was widely regarded as traditional Chinese clothes. Only in recent years, there are opposing voices disregarding Tangzhuang as traditional Chinese clothes due to its short history and controversial origin. I'll explain more in reason number 2. Currently, most funeral service stores still use Tangzhuang style to make shouyi. This is why some people immediately associate Tangzhuang with death and see it as ominous, which creates a strong sense of rejection to wear Tangzhuang. 2 years ago, there was even a rumor claiming that if a Tangzhuang style neo-Chinese outfit had an even number of buttons, then it means this is shouyi for the departed. For people who are still living and breathing, you need to wear Tangzhuang with odd number of buttons.
气死我了！竟然给我穿死人衣服！必须投诉他！
你穿的新中式可能是寿衣，一些无良商家竟然把寿衣卖给大活人穿，太无耻了！所以一定要知道怎么区分。新中式服装的扣子一般是13579的数量，而寿衣一般是2468。
衣服千万不能瞎穿啊，尤其是那种国风新中式的之类的，带纽扣的中式衣服，大家都穿过没？记住啊，这种衣服3个扣、5个扣、7个扣都可以穿，双数千万别穿。因为单数是阳数，双数是阴数。老祖宗讲4六不上身，像4个、6个纽扣的，赶紧退了或者改做吧。那不是给你穿的，那是给死人穿的。
谁能想到我买新中式竟然买到了死人衣服？现在很多人都喜欢给自己或孩子买新中式衣服，但你知道吗？你买的很可能是寿衣。
There are way too many videos like this on Douyin and Xiaohongshu saying unethical merchants are selling dead people's clothing for the living to wear because those clothes have even numbers of buttons. This rumor caused so many superstitious people to literally cut off their buttons. There's no such rule about the number of the buttons to distinguish the clothes for the living and the departed, and it has already been debunked.
到了元明清，扣子终于 C 位出道了，但是您猜怎么着？明会典、清会典都有对服饰制度的明文规定，比如材质、衣领、纹样、尺寸等等，但是依然是没有提扣子数量的事儿。考古挖出来的画作、衣冠、雕塑手办上单数、双数扣子都有。说明即使到了扣子大量普及的时候，也从来没有一项规定说双数扣子就是寿衣。
If people were just a little bit more curious and visited funeral service stores, then they would find out that a lot of shouyi actually have 5 buttons. Shouyi with both even and odd numbers of buttons exist. It doesn't matter. Now, back to Tangzhuang. It is mostly worn for auspicious events like celebrations, weddings, and festivals. And of course, you can also wear it in everyday life. Let me make it clear. Tangzhuang is not shouyi. Only clothing specifically made for the departed to wear after death is called shouyi. In fact, shouyi does not have to be Tangzhuang style at all. The design for shouyi can be a Western suit, a zhongshanzhuang, or even something like a Chanel-style outfit. The reason shouyi is commonly seen in Tangzhuang style is actually closely tied to the Republican era. During that period, many people wore what we now call tangzhuang, though at the time it wasn't called that. It was known as the Magua. I'll explain more about the history of the Magua shortly. Reason number 2. Tangzhuang is a Manchu-inspired clothing with an oppressive history. China has 56 ethnic groups, and the one that has the largest population is Han Chinese. It is the majority ethnic group, and it makes up around 91% of the total population in China. Many dynasties in Chinese history were established by the Han ethnic group, and many Chinese festivals are actually Han ethnic festivals, such as the Mid-Autumn Festival, the Dragon Boat Festival, Chinese New Year, and many more. And out of the 56 ethnic groups, there's one called Manchu Chinese, and they ruled the last Chinese dynasty, Qing Dynasty. However, the Qing Dynasty is being hated by many Chinese primarily because of its coercive policy toward the Han population and its failure to modernize the nation, which led to the century of humiliation. I want you to keep in mind that during the Qing Dynasty, Manchu people, or Manchurian, were regarded by Han people as a foreign ethnic group, practically just foreigners. It wasn't until the 1912 that they came to share the same national identity as Chinese. This shift in identity helps explain why Han people during the Qing Dynasty held such strong negative sentiments towards the Manchurians. From the Han people's perspective at the time, Manchurians were foreign invaders. After the Manchu rulers took control of China, several violent incidents occurred, including the Yangzhou Massacre, which they killed a lot of Han people. Then, they imposed a lot of coercive policies that were deeply damaging to the Han culture and the Han ethnic pride. For example, the Qing government forced Han men to adopt the Manchurian hairstyle, and those who refused would be killed. Han people were also forced to abandon their traditional clothing, which is Hanfu, and to wear Manchurian traditional clothing instead. For example, Han men were forced to wear Changpao Magua. Changpao means long robe. It evolved from the traditional Manchu clothing, Qizhuang. Sometimes, a Manchu-style jacket or vest is worn on top of Qizhuang. They're called Magua, which means horse-riding jacket, and Majia means horse-riding vest. Now, do you see the resemblance between the Magua and Tangzhuang? It is said that the term Tangzhuang was coined by the Chinese diaspora overseas. So back in the days, people in China used the term Magua, and the term Tangzhuang was used overseas. So moving forward in this video, if I use the term Magua, just know that I'm talking about Tangzhuang and vice versa. Before the Qing Dynasty, Han people wear Hanfu for thousands of years, and that's why many Han Chinese today hate those Qing government policies because they cause a rupture in the continuity of the Han fashion culture. Also, even though Manchu Chinese and Han Chinese now share the same identity as Chinese, many Han Chinese find it weird that Tangzhuang, or any clothing that has a lot of Manchu elements, to be the face of traditional Chinese clothes due to the misrepresentation of China's majority ethnic group, Han Chinese. Because after all, the thousands of years of Chinese civilization were built on Han culture. Reason number 3. Tangzhuang with Manchu roots reminds Chinese people of the humiliating history under the Qing government. Now, let's talk about the century of humiliation caused by the Qing government. The Qing government made a series of decisions that gradually led the country towards collapse. I'm sure everyone has heard of the Industrial Revolution that changed the entire human history, right? The first Industrial Revolution began in Great Britain around 1760. However, at the time, the Qing government chose to self-isolate from the world, and that caused China to fall behind the rest of the world by 100 years. Because of this decision, China was defeated in both Opium Wars. It was only then the Qing government realized the huge gap between China and the Western powers, and they finally decided to launch the self-strengthening movement in 1861 to catch up with the Industrial Revolution. However, it was too late. 100 years late, which led to another defeat in the First Sino-Japanese War in 1894. Well, how bad can it be? I mean, it can't be that bad, can it? As a result of these three wars, China lost Hong Kong, lost Taiwan, lost suzerainty over its tributary state Korea, lost many cultural relics, many of which are now sitting in the British Museum and Château de Fontainebleau in France, paid numerous war indemnities, turned Shanghai into foreign concessions, and signed numerous unequal treaties, etc. Basically, from the First Opium War in 1839 to the end of World War II in 1949, this period is known as the Century of Humiliation. During this period, numerous wars allowed foreign powers to partition China for their own benefit, causing the loss of territory, sovereignty, wealth, social order, international standing, and national pride. This is why many Chinese people have deep resentment toward the Qing Dynasty and anything associated with it, and seeing Tangzhuang, a piece of clothing with Manchu roots, can remind them of that humiliating history. For the longest time in modern history, when foreigners think of traditional Chinese clothes that represent China, they think of Tangzhuang first. But why did Tangzhuang come to be the face of traditional Chinese clothes instead of Hanfu? Logically speaking, after the Qing Dynasty ended, Hanfu should have been restored, right? Well, the answer is in the Republican era. So many events happened during this period that it ended up strengthening the national status of the Magua, which is Tangzhuang, and weakening the possibility of a Hanfu revival. There are four main reasons to this. Reason number one, Magua was designated as national attire during the Republican era. In 1912, Sun Yat-sen's revolution successfully overthrew the Qing Dynasty and established the Republic of China. In October of the same year, the second provisional president, Yuan Shikai, issued the first dress code regulations, which designated the Changpao Magua, along with Western suits, as formal national menswear. In 1929, the government issued another dress code regulations, once again reaffirming the Changpao Magua as formal attire for men. By this point, the Changpao Magua had already been designated as men's national attire twice. In 1939, the government issued the draft amendments to the dress regulations, and Changpao Magua were still included. It wasn't until the National Dress Code Regulations of 1942 that the Zhongshan replaced Changpao Magua as men's formal national attire. So after 1942, Changpao Magua gradually faded out with times. Although the Magua was designated as national formal attire during the Republican era, the government did not mandate the public to wear it. The Changpao Magua were required only on some specific occasions or for some occupations. For example, the 1929 dress code regulations stated that when men and women wear formal attire for international affairs, internationally accepted formal attire should be adopted, and that civil servants conducting ceremonies shall wear the appropriate attire specified in these regulations. So, if it wasn't mandatory, why was it so common for ordinary men to wear Changpao Magua during the Republican era? The reason is that once the government issued dress code regulations, many merchants began manufacturing and selling these garments, and the public naturally purchased them as clothing is a basic human need. In addition, both the government and the public encouraged people to buy the national attire. I'll explain that part in reason number 4. In 2001, Tangzhuang made an international debut at the 2001 Shanghai APEC meeting with a new design by incorporating the tailoring of Western suits. China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs stated that this neo Tangzhuang achieved a balance between tradition and modernity. It clearly reflected a pursuit of modernization of Chinese clothing and symbolically responded to globalization by emphasizing national characteristics. From this, you can see that in the early 2000s, China wanted a national attire with ethnic characteristics to represent the country internationally. Unfortunately, Hanfu did not come into the picture, and Hanfu revival movement has not begun yet. Looking back at history, Tangzhuang has existed as a representative attire of China for only about 114 years as of today. And that is why nowadays many Chinese people refuse to acknowledge Tangzhuang as a traditional Chinese clothes. Because if we're talking about traditional Chinese clothes, they argue it should be Hanfu, which was worn for thousands of years up until the Qing Dynasty. Reason number 2, Yuan Shikai. Do you remember Yuan Shikai? The second provisional president of the Republic of China and the one who issued the first dress code regulations? He had close ties to the Qing government because he previously served as Prime Minister of the Imperial Cabinet and held military power. When Sun Yat-sen first launched the revolution to overthrow the Qing Dynasty, it was Yuan Shikai who led the Qing soldiers to suppress the revolution. I mention this because Yuan Shikai had worked for the Qing government for many years, so it is possible that when he issued the first dress code regulations, he simply continued to adopt Qing Dynasty dress code and designated Changpao Magua as national attire for men, even though he was a Han person. Now, this is just my theory, given his complicated background and strong ties to the Manchurians even after the founding of the Republic of China. It is also worth noting that the 1912 dress code regulations were the only ones issued by Yuan Shikai. The later dress code regulations were issued by others. My guess is that they simply continued using the Changpao Magua as national attire rather than replacing them with Hanfu. Yuan Shikai also did something that made the public dislike Hanfu. In the third year after the founding of the Republic of China, which is 1914, he wore Hanfu while conducting a sacrifice to heaven ritual at the Temple of Heaven. This was the kind of ritual that an emperor would do. Well, guess what? In December 1915, he reinstated the monarchy. Yeah, he declared himself emperor and renamed the country as the Empire of China on the first day of 1916. The empire only lasted 83 days. This attempt to restore the monarchy provoked strong public opposition. Unfortunately, the restoration of monarchy became symbolically associated with Hanfu, and as a result, the early Hanfu revival movement at the time also failed. Reason number 3. People had simply grown used to wearing the Changpao Magua. In the early years of the Republic of China, some people returned to wearing Hanfu, while others chose to wear Western suits such as Sun Yat-sen. However, many people had grown accustomed to wearing the Changpao Magua. I know you're gonna ask, weren't the Han people hate the Qing Dynasty? So why didn't they immediately abandon the Manchu-style clothing after the Qing Dynasty was overthrown? Well, my friend, that's because time can change a lot of things, including your values, habits, etc. The Qing Dynasty ruled the Han population for roughly 270 years. Do you realize how much can change in 270 years? Let me put it this way. If we go back 270 years, the US was still a colony. Do you think the values of the colonists back then would be the same as the Americans today? No. And that is why many Han people had become accustomed to wearing the Changpao Magua. In 1934, the famous Chinese writer Lu Xun published an article in Shenbao newspaper titled The Decline of Western Clothing, which reflects his mindset of being accustomed to the Changpao Magua. At the beginning of the article, he wrote, "For decades, we have often resented ourselves for not having satisfactory clothes to wear." Toward the end of the article, when commenting on restoring Hanfu or adopting Western suit, he wrote, "If we restore ancient styles, the clothing from the Yellow Emperor to the Song and Ming dynasties, it is difficult to understand for now. If we imitate opera costumes like dragon ropes, jade bells, white-soled black boots, and we ride motorcycles and eat foreign cuisine, it would inevitably seem kind of funny." So after all these back and forth changes, it seems that the Changpao Magua remained the most reliable choice. Although they too are foreign clothing, I'm afraid it's just not going to come off. By the way, Lu Xun was a Han person born during the Qing Dynasty, and he was 31 years old when the Republic of China was founded. So from this article, we can glimpse the attitudes of at least some Han people during that period. There were people like Lu Xun who saw Hanfu as an opera costume rather than traditional Chinese clothes. Reason number 4, wearing the Changpao Magua as national attire to save the country. Now, this section is about the good historical chapter of the Magua. Just because it was associated with the Qing Dynasty doesn't mean everything about it was bad. During the Republican era, it actually made positive contributions to China. In fact, wearing the Changpao Magua was seen as a way to help save the country. Really? Wearing Changpao Magua could save the country? Was it that powerful? Yes, because wearing it promoted patriotism, which in turn contributed to the national economy. You're still confused, isn't it? Don't worry, let's start with the terrible situation China was in during the late Qing Dynasty. From the late Qing Dynasty, whenever China lost wars to foreign powers, it was forced to sign unequal treaties. As a result, China became a semi-colonial, semi-feudal state. Although the Qing Dynasty was overthrown in 1912, the early Republic of China was soon mired in partisan turmoil, so the national economy at the time was terrible. So how do you make a poor country rich? Through industrial development. A guy named Zhang Jian advocated the idea of industrial salvation in the late Qing Dynasty in 1895, and it became popular during the Republican era. It was a belief that developing capitalist industry and commerce was the path to national salvation. The textile and garment sections were part of this industrial development. So after the self-strengthening movement, China began adopting foreign technology and equipment. The domestic industries gradually developed. However, they faced severe competition from imported goods. The textile industry was hit especially hard. From the late 19th century to the early 20th century, China imported large quantities of foreign cotton yarn from Japan, India, and a little bit from Britain, because imported cotton yarn was cheaper than traditional handspun yarn. At the end of the 19th century, cotton yarn's imports showed an accelerated growth trend. To rescue China's industry and commerce, the Chinese products movement emerged. The movement aimed to resist foreign imperialism and support domestic products by boycotting foreign products. Okay, so how did the Magua contribute positively to the Chinese products movement? On December 12, 1911, the Chinese National Goods Preservation Association petitioned the government to mandate the use of domestically produced fabrics in dress code regulations. The government responded positively. For example, the 1912 dress code regulations required that formal attire use domestically produced silk, cotton, or linen, such as Western clothing. Though Changpao Magua at the time did not have an explicit manufacturing requirement, I assume this was because the Changpao Magua were domestic products for which China was the primary producer. So there was no need to impose an explicit manufacturing requirement as there was for Western clothing. And that is the case until 1929. The 1929 dress code regulations required the materials for formal attire and uniforms to domestic products. This time, Changpao Magua had an explicit manufacturing requirement to use domestic materials. The 1939 draft amendments to the dress regulations stated that all materials must be limited to national products. And it even stated that promoting the use of national products is the foremost measure for revitalizing industry. As clothing is a necessity for everyone, it should be restricted to domestic production to stop economic loss and strengthen national industry. The plan was good. However, it would be ineffective if people didn't follow them. So why would people buy the national attire out of basic need? They would buy them out of patriotism. But where did that patriotism come from? There was a pattern emerged from the late Qing Dynasty to the early Republican era, which was, whenever the government had diplomatic failures that caused harm to China, it sparked patriotic sentiments among the Chinese people and led to boycotts of foreign products. For example, in 1908, 1915, and 1919, Chinese people boycott and even burn Japanese products. Why Japanese products specifically? Because during those years, much of the political oppression came from Japan. So if you're curious, look up the 1915 unequal treaty, known as the 21 Demands, and you'll understand the public anger. Now, if we return to the earlier data on cotton yarn imports, you'll see that after 1915, import volumes dropped sharply. Due to the rising patriotism, more and more Chinese people joined the Chinese products movement. The movement, combined with government dress code regulations, created a sense of pride in wearing clothing made from domestic materials. Also, because of World War I, Western countries reduced their exports to China. That reduction significantly expanded the domestic market for Chinese industrial products. All of these factors helped China to import fewer foreign products, resist foreign economic domination, keep the money in the domestic market, and achieve the goal of saving the nation through industry. In the end, the industrial salvation achieved partial success. While heavy industry struggled, light industry thrived, particularly textiles and garment sectors. The general public wore Changpao, Magua, and other national attires during the Republican era for about 37 years, until the People's Republic of China was founded in 1949 and abolished the dress code regulations. So for some elderly people, such as my grandparents, they see the Magua, or Tangzhuang, same thing. They see it as traditional Chinese clothes. So when they pass away, they want to return to the traditions and wear Tangzhuang as their last piece of clothing. Did I just tie back to the beginning of the video? Yes, I sure did. The main video is done. Now, let's move on to the supplementary knowledge. This is your extracurricular. Number 1. Han elements on tangzhaung. So many Chinese hate on tangzhaung nowadays, and they would say those ugly buttons that look like centipedes are from Manchurians. If we're talking about just one singular button, then that button is Han element, and it's called pan kou or niu pan. The English translated name for that button is frog button, which is the ugliest name that I've ever heard. There are so many different types of pan kou. And there's a type of pan kou called yizikou because the shape looks like the Chinese word one. Yizikou can be found as early as the terracotta warriors of the Qing Dynasty, which was the first imperial dynasty of China. As for wugongkou, which means centipede buttons, it refers to when multiple yizikou form a straight line, making it look like a centipede. And wugongkou did appear on Manchu clothing mostly during the Qing Dynasty or Magua during the Republican era. As far as I can research, it seems like this name appeared in the 2000s online. I could not find the name in multiple dress code regulations of the Republican era. Number 2, Magua, Tangzhuang, which term to use? And let's talk about the evolution of the Magua. I know not that long ago I said the Magua and Tangzhuang is the same thing, it's just a name usage difference. While that is true, it's slightly more complicated than that. A lot of the Tangzhuang you see on the market today take shape of the Neo Tangzhuang from 2001. You can see it in the shoulders tailoring, like right here. They have a sharp turn. The modern Tangzhuang evolved from the Magua of the Republican era, which was often called Tangzhuang overseas at the time. The Republican era Magua itself evolved from the Manchu Magua of the Qing Dynasty. That's essentially the relationship. Another interesting thing I'll mention is the evolution of the Magua. Like everything else, fashion is constantly evolving. Manchu clothing also adopted Han elements during the Qing Dynasty. For example, Manchurians adopted stand-up collar for their clothing. Stand-up collar is a Han element, and you can find it in Hanfu during the Ming Dynasty. When you look at the early Qing Dynasty clothing, such as their robes and maguas, they had a round collar. It was not until the mid-Ming Dynasty that stand-up collar were adopted. Besides that, Magua from the Qing Dynasty had wider sleeves than those of the Republican era. Number 3. Taichi clothes. Have you ever seen elderly Chinese people wearing a piece of clothing that looks like tangzhaung and they play Taichi in the park? Or have you seen those kung fu folks wearing it in martial arts films? Well, those are Taichi clothes. They are not tangzhaung. Most of the Taichi clothes on the market take on the tangzhaung styles. It can take on other styles as well, such as Hanfu. The difference between Taichi clothes and tangzhaung is the use of different materials for different functions. The materials for Taichi clothes needs to be more stretchy for exercise, and they tend to be longer and the sleeves are slightly wider. But if you ask me if I can tell Taichi clothes and tangzhaung apart in films, for 99% of the time, no. Well, what about the 1% of the time? Given the film's background is set in the Republican era, I can kind of tell them apart by counting buttons. Which leads me to number 4, odd number of buttons. Remember in the beginning of the video where I said some Chinese netizens claim that tangzhaung with odd number of buttons are for the living to wear? Well, the reason most tangzhaungs have an odd number of buttons probably has to do with the 1929 dress code regulations. This document standardized the number of buttons on the Magua to be 5 buttons. And this requirement was mentioned again in the 1939 draft amendments to dress regulations. If you see a piece of clothing that looks like the Magua, takes place in the Republican era, has more than 5 buttons, and the character is practicing martial arts while wearing it, then it's probably a Taichi clothes. But FYI, counting buttons is not 100% foolproof because there are Taichi clothes with 5 buttons only in the Republican era, such as the picture on the right. Most of the tangzhaung you see nowadays are still using 5 buttons, but it can be more or less than 5 buttons. Number 5. Qipao. Manchu Qizhuang influenced the form of men's Changpao in the Qing Dynasty, which in turn influenced the form of women's Qipao in the Republican era. The Qipao has Manchu roots and incorporates Han elements and Western tailoring techniques, making the dress that we recognize today. It is even listed as the national attire for women in 1929 and 1942 dress code regulations, and in the 1939 draft amendments to the dress regulations as well. Unlike Changpao Magua, which faded out in 1950s, Qipao did not fade out. This is just a very brief introduction about Qipao. Maybe I'll make a video about that, sometime in the future. Let's talk about the online public sentiment in China regarding the tangzhaung or any Manchu-inspired clothing, and answer the most burning question for all the foreign friends watching this, which is it okay to wear tangzhaung after knowing all the hate, all the history? If you think foreigners are the only ones getting hate from Chinese people, you're so wrong. Chinese are getting hate from Chinese too, and they were called names even worse than those used for foreigners. They will be called Qing Dynasty supporters, or lapdogs for the Qing Dynasty, or, there are worse terms than that. At least when you're a foreigner, you get to use, oh, I'm a foreigner type of card. Yes, there are Chinese people wearing the Adidas jacket. You don't really see Chinese people wearing it because of the reasons that I mentioned in this video, and also, this jacket is so expensive. That jacket costs 1,099 yuan, which is about $217 for Canadian dollars or $158 for US dollars. One thing you need to know about Chinese people is that they are practical, okay? Most Chinese people like to spend money on the things that are worth the price. I really love the yellow Adidas jacket and I really wanted to buy one until I looked up the price. Yeah, do I have the money to buy it? Of course I have the money to buy it. But am I comfortable spending that much money on a jacket like I just dropped 2 pennies on the street? No. So yeah, no, I'm not buying it. And another thing to consider is that the price of this jacket is about 1/5 of an entry-level monthly salary in Shenzhen, China. Shenzhen is a first-tier city, and it could be 1/3 of an entry-level monthly salary in lower-tier city. So, there's that. I hope this comparison in purchasing power puts things in perspective for you. As for the online public sentiment in China, at this point, no one can say anything nice about Manchu-inspired clothing such as tangzhuang, Qipao. Yes, Qipao as well. Qipao has been getting a lot of hate in recent years, not as much as tangzhuang or neo-Chinese outfit, but still. No one can even talk about those clothing from a neutral educational standpoint without catching hate like, you got paid by Manchu Chinese to talk positively about Manchu culture. You want to replace Han culture with Manchu culture. You want to uglify Chinese and China by wearing tangzhuang or any Manchu-inspired clothing to please the foreigners, etc. That is the online public sentiment in China. Offline public sentiment is different. The hate goes hand in hand with Hanfu revival movement. That is another complicated topic that I will talk about in the future because I also participated in the movement. And I did it so many years ago before all these Hanfu influencers were popping out everywhere these recent years. So to answer your question, is it okay for foreigners to wear tangzhaung? Look, if the Adidas Tangzhuang is that controversial, then there would be a massive boycott. And netizens would hate on celebrities who did a commercial with Adidas, and those celebrities would be apologizing profusely and get cancelled from brand deals and shows and movies and variety shows and whatnot. Nothing like that happened. People who like to wear it will wear it, and people who hate it will hate it. It's okay to wear it, it's part of the Chinese history, despite how complicated it is. To sum it up, there are 4 morals to this video. Number 1, fashion is always political, and it is always that deep. Number 2, history is complicated. A lot more complicated than you think. Number 3, there's a reason behind everything. And number 4, public value and habit can change over time. So this is it. This is the end of the entire video. I hope you learned a lot of things from this video, and let me know in the comments what you learned. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.